So the next generation of space propulsion, laying the infrastructure for new space age and interplanetary space travel. Mark Stokes joins us on this episode to talk through his journey from mechanical and deep learning engineer to co-founder and CEO of Magdrive. Mark, how are you today?
I'm great. Thank you, David. Thanks very much for having me on.
Well, firstly, thank you for taking the time to join us and sort of share some of your journey. Could you maybe just start off with giving us a little bit of background in terms of what it is that you do and what sort of services you offer?
Absolutely. So what we're developing is the propulsion system, or if you like, the engine that goes onto a satellite once it's been launched to space. Now, this allows the satellite to move around in space, to reposition. It keeps it from falling back into Earth's atmosphere, but increasingly a lot of commercial and government actors in space, they want a satellite which is highly maneuverable, that can go to different orbits, that can accomplish very rapid response for everything from satellite servicing to Earth observation, lifetime extension for high value satellites. So it's becoming increasingly important that whatever is in space stays there and can move as maneuverably as possible. Until recently, the only ways to really move around in space were you either had really high thrust, which is just your newtons of force, or high miles per gallon, or efficiency. What we're building is the best of both worlds, a system which has very low mass, but has the high thrust and high efficiency all in one system.
So you're building the bits. I mean, I'm going to sort of my limited knowledge of space and things, and going to sort of movies and things where you see, the spaceships up there with the little jets that go to sort of spin things around. Is that, in principle, is that the part of the
Exactly, yeah. Anything that helps a satellite to reposition, to maneuver in space is a propulsion system. On the simplest end, you've got like what we call reaction wheels, which are basically just wound up coils basically, and as you release them, they impart a sort of like spinning force on the satellite.
Yeah.
And you can do some interesting stuff with that. But on the bigger end, of course, you have just like chemical propulsion systems, where you have a really like a sort of the kind of system. It's just basically a smaller system of what you see on a rocket, on a launch vehicle.
Okay.
It's just on a much smaller scale, and that helps to move the satellite around, go to different orbits. But there are a lot of different applications and a lot of different ways of doing that across the industry.
That's really, really cool. Now, how on earth did you get involved in that?
So yeah, because I started out doing classics. It was my first degree. I did classics, and I love doing Latin,
I
ancient
say you
Greek.
speak like 5 or 6 languages looking at your background and stuff, do you?
I do, yeah. I had a leg up. I had a leg up. My mother's side of the family is from Barcelona, so I had Spanish and Catalan kind of wrapped up. It made French easy. It made Italian easy. But I got to the end of that degree, and I realized that I didn't want to join the civil service. And being Daniel Jackson from Stargate isn't an actual career, so I decided to pivot hard, and I went back to my other sort of passion in my young years, which was astrophysics. So I started studying mechanical engineering and maths instead. And eventually I realized that what I really wanted to do was brains or space. So I found my way to Imperial College. I did a master's in neurotechnology, which is actually a master's in deep learning in AI. They only really tell you that when you get there. But kept that dream of space very much alive. And that's where I met my co-founder, that's where I met Tom. We both went to an event where would-be startup founders pitched an idea they had. How I was pitching something else in the space industry entirely, but the event which was supposed to bring us together with more business-minded, non-technical founders, actually we ignored them completely, and we just spoke to each other for about 3 hours. At which point we were very clearly aligned on like, yes, we don't know it yet. We don't know what we're going to build yet, but you're my co-founder to do it with.
Love that.
And over the course of about maybe 6 to 9 months, while managing, Tom was in the final year of his PhD. He was writing up this mega thesis, and I was doing my, all the final dissertation for my master's. We went through a few different ideas, but we ultimately landed on propulsion. And the reason was because it's that area which it's the next big thing. Launch to space has gotten a lot cheaper. It's got a lot more reliable, and kind of the electronics you can buy off the shelf nowadays, they're all space rated, and they're all amazing. The kind of things you can get off the shelf nowadays, you'd have sounded like a madman asking for them 5 to 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So we're like, the next thing literally, our thinking was to turn humanity into a spacefaring civilization is being able to move around in space. We can get there already. We can get there and we can stay
Yeah.
there, but we've got to move there and we've got to do it well. So we had a lot of different ideas and iterations, and ultimately it came down to a combination of Tom's science, which was um, essentially Tom's PhD was high power laboratory astrophysics, which means blowing things up with insane amounts of electricity to mimic cosmic events like black holes and things like that, and making grand assumptions even when using gigawatts of power and stepping that up even further. Combining that kind of science with my much more hands-on mechanical engineering to say, okay, the original idea is massive and mad, and it was to build a launch rocket that just uses plasma to get to space. We were like, it's going to take a very long time to build that, and a lot of money we don't have. So we scale that way down to something which you can put in the palm of your hand. Is there an interest for that in the space industry? And we realized, yes, there massively is, because no one else is doing exactly what we're doing right now. We see it as, yeah, the next sort of sci-fi thing that's going to get us to space as a civilization. And honestly, people ask, to answer your question more directly about how I got to work in the space industry, I don't mean to sound flippant, but the answer is I just founded a company. And then we 100% just dived into it with our limited savings and meeting everybody and talking to everybody and getting started.
And you found somebody you've got aligned values and aligned sort of long-term visions and goal with, so as you
Oh,
can,
massively.
yeah.
That's
And
a
have
massive deal.
either of you got background in business? Has either of you sort of got come from business backgrounds at all?
No, we both experimented with smaller sort of side hustles,
Okay.
startups. The issue for us had been we'd found something we kind of liked the idea of, but that question of, do you want to do this for the next 5 years ish? The answer had always been kind of, no,
Yeah.
no. I mean, like Tom had some really cool ideas. Tom's a great programmer as well. Tom's basically Iron Man. You got to understand on the
Okay.
technical. You mentioned technical and business. My life has become the business aspect. Tom is very much the technical guy here. He built our first prototype and detonated our first plasma during lockdown in his daughter's spare bedroom.
Brilliant.
The guy's Iron Man. So he had a lot more of these kind of ideas himself, but nothing had kind of grabbed him the same way this had. This real like hardware build for space.
Having that passion for what you want to do is really important to keep you motivated to keep turning up each day to go out and do what you do, isn't it?
Absolutely. We're aligned on the idea of building bigger and better mag drives until the day we die.
Brilliant.
And it's kind of is that simple.
So how long have you guys been going for now?
So we founded the company in September 2019.
Mhm.
We raised our first seed funding at the end of 2020.
Okay. You
So
must have
we've,
learned some things over the time. So what would you say your biggest learnings as a business owner since September 2019?
oof, I could probably break them down into like, there's more to say, but how to act like a startup and sell the vision of what you're doing. Massively sell the vision. Find why people need to care about what you're doing and really push that. Your more than anyone, your direct team that you bring on needs to buy that as well. Because the company you build is the team you build at the end of the day, especially in this kind of pre-revenue phase. That it's really important to help people, that you need to learn everything. It's not something I expected I'd be doing, but for example, we
Yeah.
moved from a 800 square foot lab space into about 3,000 square foot a couple of years ago, and I had to learn how to do all of the sort of large scale rental agreements, talking to lawyers, all of that stuff, uh, in one ear out the other. Years later, I can't remember a thing about it, but at the time, it was all consuming.
It's necessary.
So,
Yeah.
so being ready to learn and do everything, but also on top of that, finding what you're really good at. My background's in mechanical engineering.
Yeah.
What I'm actually really good at is strategy. What I'm really good at is finding the right way to either talk to people or the right way to do things and inch out every 1% of something so we can create the biggest leverage possible and focus on those high leverage activities. the mechanical engineers we have in the company now, the guys are incredible. They have a sort of 3D headspace for extremely complex systems that I never had.
Yeah.
They're way better mechanical engineers than I am. So it made sense early on for me to say, I'm going to step away from mechanical engineering and I'm going to focus on what I know I'm good at, which is talking to people, being the face, and behind that, strategizing on where we are now and how we get to basically putting this system in space in general.
There's some great lessons there. I think one of the things that's a common theme is find out what you're good at and then get get the right people around you to support the areas where you're not quite so good, but focus on your strengths. The
It's
other is,
yeah, because it's an important message that a lot of people who back you want to see as well. They want to know about your like the way it was portrayed to us. What's your right to win? Why
yeah,
you? Why are
yeah,
you guys who've we had this question? Why are you guys who've never raised money before? You never run a business before. Why
yeah.
is it you guys who are going to do this and build a company which as we see it, could be one of the biggest companies of the 21st century that dominates the solar system. Why should it be you guys? And I was like, well, apart from my
Absolutely.
massive amount of self-belief, here's why.
Yeah. And then the other point that I picked up on as well is learning enough, even if it's just at that point, there's enough what you need for where you are, but also enough to ask the right questions of the people that you need to then get onto support. So that's sort of generalist thing. So, having the
Definitely.
ability to learn enough to ask the right questions to get the right people around you if it's not an area of expertise.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
the third thing I really liked what you're saying is act as a startup. So I went to a
Yeah.
business conference last week, and I can't remember the speaker who was talking about it, but he said that kind of the message was the big successful organizations are the ones that still remember themselves as a startup, but then they are leveraging their sort of time and financial ability as a bigger customer. But culturally, they still remember what it's like to be a family business or a small business or a startup.
Yeah. Yeah. In terms of acting like a startup, first one, selling the vision.
Yeah,
If people don't see that you're excited about what you're doing, no one else is going to be. You've got to infect them with just how passionate you are about this. And you've got to bring that to every time you're on a stage, basically, or talking to people, or bringing the team in. So, for example, selling the vision, a lot of the times that just means the presentation of the company. It means what does your website look like? What are the main things you're trying to, if you had to choose like 3, 4, 5 evocative words to get your company across, what will you choose and build out everything you do from that? What publications you try and go for, the way you present yourself, the kind of key phrases and words. And in particular, if you're building hardware in something like the space industry, using language which is specifically designed to evoke interest and enthusiasm and passion from the types of people who you want to be listening to you, like chief engineers at satellite operator companies,
mm,
things like that. Um, I guess the other one is very much that team culture. It's startups have a very unique team culture, which I think doesn't I probably has some kind of anthropological value of study in it because the way we've approached it is we've built the company we always wanted to work at.
yeah,
So we have a actually very horizontal structure. Me and Tom don't, well, neither do we have the time to micromanage engineers. We know we have goals to reach, and it's mine and Tom's responsibility to lead on that and to set those. But the engineers themselves build up towards that in whatever way that we work collaboratively on. They encounter failure on an almost daily basis, and they roll over it and they just keep going. They're not phased by it at all. So bringing those people into the company is kind of essential. People who get the startup mentality. But apart from that, we've got to get on with people. We've
yeah.
got to get on with these guys. And I used to have a question right in the early days when we brought on board the first like 3 guys to join the team. I used to ask them, have you ever played Dungeons and Dragons? Because this is going to tell me, okay, are they going to get all the cultural references and all the nerdy shit that me and Tom talk about all the time? Are they going to get that? And they'll say things like, "Oh yeah, actually, yeah, I love D&D. Oh, I know I haven't played it, but I'd love to." And it's like, "Great, great. We know just that question. We know we're good." I think one guy, we weren't even actually interviewing him. It was a soft interview. We thought like, "Hey, this guy would be great. If we can steal him, this will be great." And he saw that I had a sword on the wall behind me and a map, and he asks me, "Mark, do you play Dungeons and Dragons?"
Uh,
Actually, I do. Yes. Um, so that kind of cohesion, honestly, that kind of cohesion plus alignment on the vision and being excited about it, that creates the kind of team which sticks around. Because as calculated as it sounds, we want this to be the last job any of the people on the current team ever have. No one's going to ever know more about the Magdrive than they do. Just like you were mentioning, companies that maintain that startup mentality, but there's a bank of knowledge that is built up in those early days as well. And especially for us, because we're building brand new hardware never built before by anybody on Earth, that's super important.
It's absolutely, the culture of a startup is a very different culture to something that's a corporate, been running for hundreds of years and is potentially just a job to people.
Exactly. And that's the thing. Like, for as long as I possibly can, I want to meet everybody who comes to work at MagDrive. For as long as I can, I want to give everyone my time to know them, to see what makes them tick, to like give them, yeah, this is the kind of job you would love to have. Welcome to the company we always wanted to work at.
So what would you say if you had sort of top three secrets to creating that productive, engaged working environment, what would be the sort of top three tips that you'd share with people?
Those people that you bring on board have to have agency. If you're hiring the first people into a startup, they've got to be people who are going to make their own decisions. They're going to have to make their own design choices. These are inevitably the kind of people who come to you with a problem and a solution and how it's going.
Yeah.
They don't come to us with problems, and they actually never have. They come to us with problem, solution. By the way, this is how it's going. I've been implementing it. It's going really well.
Yeah.
That kind of mentality. They want to work hard. They want to move fast. They want to break things, and they want to invent, which is a quality you see a lot in. To be honest, which is a quality you see a lot in certain engineers. They don't want to maintain things. They want to build things. Now, there's an important thing to mention on that. They're all shareholders.
Okay.
They're all shareholders in Magdrive.
Yeah.
And it's not, and outside of the US, it's not something you see a lot of. Across Europe, for example, the first people to a European startup, they're on a salary. They could be on a pretty decent salary, but unlike our guys know, our team knows that, hey, when we get these things into space and we strike it rich and we all roll around in the bajillions, it's all of us, and not just me and Tom.
Yeah.
Like, everyone's going to be a millionaire. Everybody is.
It's a real mindset shift, isn't it, when you're vested in the company?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And I see it reflected that they are really invested. And part of that is alignment with the vision, how excited they are about space. But I can't be blind to the fact that
it doesn't have to be multi-billion-pound companies that get that value as well. It can be smaller companies that aren't necessarily ever even thinking about selling or cashing in. It's that vested sort of psychology. It makes a really big difference to performance.
Absolutely. If I was starting any other company, I'd always make the first people who come in shareholders. Absolutely.
So people with agency, some people with that sort of buy-in and that self-starting attitude. What else? What other tips?
That self-starting attitude. I think it's people. It's an odd one to describe, but essentially risk takers.
Okay.
Now, it's not exactly the same as it's not exactly the same as having agency, because someone who has agency may well go off on several branches of activity. It doesn't necessarily mean a risk taker. It's hard to gauge what that is, and to a certain degree, it's important to push that from the top if it's something that you value.
Yeah.
But for that, the best thing to do is kind of really troll your own personal network, your smartest friends, your weirdest, craziest friends. Look for people who don't quite seem to belong in the current organization that they're in. Maybe their talents are being wasted. If you find yourself questioning, why is that guy working for them? Why is he working? Or why is he working for him? Or he feels like he'd be better off doing something hands-on and crazy. Like, yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. So when you talk about risk taking, you're talking about people that really sort of want to push the boundaries a little bit, think outside the box, and sort of come up with different solutions to things.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And there are a lot of hallmarks that show that. In the past, we've had, we haven't always got it right. We've had to let people go from Magdrive. And ultimately, the reason was that we saw a real lack of ability to grasp the agency that we wanted them to have,
Yeah.
um, and a lack of initiative to take those risks. They're not bad engineers, great engineers, and great to hang out with and great fit for the team culturally, but more of a safe set mindset,
Okay.
essentially. Um, and so we've gotten better at recognizing that. So I don't think it's something you can recognize immediately, but
And you
it's
have to have the right environment, sort of from an organization point of view, to allow freedom of that risk taking, freedom to push the boundaries without going too far, I guess.
yeah, I think so. And on that, it's really important to have those kind of, what are we working on like right now, this
Yeah.
month, the next month, etc. Having goals that everyone knows they're working towards and being available to the team, especially in the early days, like me and Tom were, when there was like five of us, including me and Tom.
Yeah.
Well, we were very like present and very hands-on nonetheless with the team. So there's a balance there towards sort of micromanaging and encouraging risk taking, but allowing engineers to go with their own ideas, try out their own things. A lot of the time, we had just test rigs going up in the lab because we didn't know what the best way forward would be for, for example, we use a metal propellant for the Magdrive, a solid metal propellant, which is unique in all of the space industry for satellite propulsion. And I mean, it's certainly at what the volumes that we use it at. And we didn't know what the best way to kind of feed that into our plasma injector was. We were like, well, let's experiment. So we had like several rigs just up in the lab of different forms. Some of it was being melted, some of it was being pushed, some of it was being pulled, some of it was being all kinds of different form factors.
Sure.
And we relied on the creativity of the engineers to to gauge those options against each other fairly. Because of course, the worst place to be in there is you've got all these options out in front of you and you're trying them all out. But what if your engineer isn't good enough to sort of give one of them its fair run?
Yeah.
But we've trusted them over and over, and they've never let us down.
Very cool. Really exciting.
So yeah, looking for
There's a
risk
great,
takers definitely the second.
so it's a great sort of working environment, team environment, freedom to express, freedom to sort of push boundaries and try different things and things like that. You mentioned quite a few things actually, which resonates. Having that clear vision, then having the goals, then having some sort of rules of the game, and then encouraging that risk taking. So it sounds like sort of quite a well thought through strategy to
I
get
mean,
the best out of people.
I'm glad it sounds like a well thought through strategy because this is all in hindsight. early on, early on, me and Tom we never hired anybody before. So we're like, we've got to get on with them. We can assure that. And then we can look for signs, ask them very specific questions about this. And in that case, it's really useful to have like domain knowledge about. So the very first guy we ever hired came in, looked at our electrical schematics and just goes, oh no, that's wrong, and started changing it. And we're like, yes, yes. I looked over at Tom. I started giving them, the big eyes. I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, this is good. I don't know how to hire people, but this sounds good to me. This sounds really good. Or of course, Tom's background in plasma physics means that we bring on board somebody, to increase our ability to work on the plasma physics, on the experimental or numerical side. We know what questions to ask to see if their creative thinking is in place. We can outlay a situation which we've solved, and we think we did it quite creatively, see what they come up with for the same problem. And the plasma physicists who've joined the team have all demonstrated a real sort of creativity when it comes to setting up experiments, diagnostics, running numerical simulations. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Something that's just sprung to mind actually is one of the biggest challenges is it's a bit of a pandemic really, and one our James Vincent, our director of coaching from Action Coach, talks about it quite a lot, which is self-sabotage, is having that bit in the brain that actually stops you from doing something. So listening to you talking about your story around a great strategy that's all come from hindsight, clearly that self-sabotage hasn't stopped you from going out and acting, going and making decisions, going to make it happen, kind of figuring out afterwards, which is fantastic to hear because I think there's so many business opportunities and entrepreneurs out there that just don't get started because of self-sabotage.
I think I No, for us it was always we will figure it out as we go
Yeah,
along. We just will. I guess this is kind of similar to imposter syndrome.
yeah,
Um, and the thing about imposter syndrome is that it can let you can either let it kind of consume you and you don't get started, or um, frankly, you just you use it, and you can use it in a really positive way where I find realize that you don't know something, so you have to go out and fill in the gaps of what you don't know. Are you lacking in knowledge or certain, you feel like you don't know enough people in the industry? Well, then go and network. Go
Find
and
it.
network, fill in that gap. Do you not know enough about a particular technical topic and you feel you're being left-footed when you have to talk about a more technical thing with a potential customer, in which case go and read the books, go and work on it yourself, get that extra knowledge in. So imposter syndrome can really elevate you in that way, as well as yeah, potentially it can hinder you. That kind
Yeah.
of self-sabotage can come up, but I think that's where it's really important to have a support, the kind of support of co-founders of those team members as well.
The right people around you, and an awareness of sort of recognizing it and then using it to your advantage. So where do you see yourselves, and where do you see MagSafe over the next 5 years? What does that look like for you? And
Mm.
what words of advice would you have for people looking to grow out their businesses, looking to grow?
Oof, this is going to be quite specific, I guess. So in 5 years' time, we'll have Magdrive thrusters. We'll have hundreds. We'll have thousands of Magdrive thrusters on board satellites in low Earth orbit all the way out to geostationary orbit. We're building, bigger and bigger Magdrives is the plan. We're going to be continuing R&D in the UK, but we want to, branch out manufacturing to the United States, to Europe as well. We have other products which we want to get on board, and we want to be using the Magdrive and really pushing the envelope for entirely new things you can do in space. Um, that's kind of everything comes from what's the next big thing we can do in space. So,
Yeah,
for example, right now it's the way the industry is going is smaller satellites but large stations, whether they are for human habitation, whether they're for manufacturing high value materials and components to bring back down to Earth that you couldn't build on Earth because of the gravity. We want to be enabling all of those aspects of it as well. So 5 years time, definitely increasing the size of the team. It works great that a lot of the current team, so that kind of initial team they'll definitely sort of like spread around, whether they end up becoming, they end up becoming sort of specialist knowledge, or whether they become more entrenched and become sort of more managerial. That's up to them. But really, what we do is going to leverage a lot of their knowledge as well. And ultimately, just to continue pushing the boundaries of what we can build with mag drives. One of the really exciting points that we've looked at is essentially as we build bigger and bigger mag drives, we need more and more power on board. And even if we start putting batteries on, batteries are heavy, and
yeah,
you reach what in electronics or in hardware engineering you'd call a kind of a power density plateau, which is really hard to push through, where your power to mass actually doesn't improve, even though you add more power, you end up adding more mass anyway.
yeah.
Nuclear fission actually is the best way to just smash right through that power plateau, that density plateau. So initial conversations with very big companies developing small modular nuclear fission reactors for use in space is absolutely going to be the future of how we get around in orbit, but also how we extend humanity's reach out to the moon, out to Mars as well. So they're working on it. So are we, and
Yeah.
that's going to be the most exciting thing to do the actual work on in 5 years' time. We have some conversations right now, and they ask me things like, suppose we did deliver this to you, Mr. Stokes. How would you want it delivered? I'm like, I don't know. Like with all the HDMI cables attached, like probably. I have no idea. Um, but working on changing the way humanity even views space is the biggest thing.
Okay.
Um, space stations, nuclear power in space. Those are the real sci-fi things that really move the needle.
It's a really exciting time for change, isn't it? There's a lot of changing in the marketplace in terms of AI and all that sort of stuff on ground on Earth, let alone what the
Mm,
opportunities are up out in space as well. This
yeah.
has been really, really interesting. I could talk to you about it for hours and clearly see the passion coming across. Is there anything that you'd like to share with the listeners, or where can they come and find you if they wanted to sort of find out a bit more about what you're doing?
Sure. Listeners can get in touch through the website. Finding me on LinkedIn shouldn't be too much trouble either. I think for anyone who's on the cusp of their own startup, or maybe maybe they've registered the company, but they haven't really pushed and got started, and there are a lot of ideas around why. There is no better time than just right now. There's no alternative and no reason not to start talking to people. There's no reason not to start looking for that first amount of grant funding that you can get in. Build something, anything that shows even an analog of what it is that you actually want to develop in the long term. People will see what you people there's no substitute for people seeing what you've built and the passion that you have for it.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Mark, thank you ever so much for
Likewise.
taking the time again to share your journey. It's a really inspirational story. I'm really looking forward to seeing the next few years and sort of watching your progress and see what happens, not just on Earth, what happens on outer space as well.
Thanks very much, David. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.